Away, man.
Newcastle upon Tyne. What a cracking city. The canny tune, packed full of hidden history if you know where to look. In this video, I've visited just some of Newcastle city centre's ghost signs and uncovered the history behind them and their buildings so you don't have to. We'll hear stories of steamboats, tailors, brewers and map makers as I take you on a ghost sign tour of cracking Newcastle. First up on the tour, let's travel to Gallagate. On a small street called Killingworth Place are these wrought iron gates with the initials AH on them. These stand for Andrew House, Andrew being the Andrew of liver salts fame. The street and gates predate the surrounding building, which was built for the General Electric Company in 1930. Andrew's liver salts was sold from 1894 by Scott and Turner Limited, who had offices here, and was named after the nearby St Andrew's Church. The name was trademarked in 1909 and was widely advertised and known, but the product was ceased only recently in 2023 after the original Scott and Turner Company was merged and acquired over the years. The gates still stand as a reminder of the hidden history of this area. Let's travel to the Keyside now, to this beautiful hotel, which was formerly the CoOp Wholesale Society Warehouse. Being near the Tyne gave it easy shipping access, and previously the Keyside branch line would have served this area for loading and unloading. The building was used as a grain and cotton warehouse, and the beautiful ghost sign to its former use has been maintained at the top of the building. Next up, the Big Marge. Look above the doorway of Pop World in the Big Marge, and you'll see this beautiful hand-painted sign telling us that Arthur R. Richards is the licensee. Mr. Richards was a prolific license holder of many pubs in the early 1900s, including the Grange Hotel in Jarrah, the Gosforth Hotel, the Albion Hotel, the Duncow Inn in Willetton Quay, and the Royal Turks Hotel in Grey Street. However, on many occasions, Mr. Richards was summoned to court on the charge of having unlawfully sold beer and rum under the Liquor Control Order, or serving a drunken person, or permitting drunkenness at the Gosforth Hotel. He was even fined £5 on one occasion, quite a large sum at the time. This building also features ghost signs higher up in the form of a half-moon sign, which is echoes of its time as the Half Moon Inn. In 1910, Mr. Richards was proprietor of this pub, so this sign likely dates from around this period. Look up at this beautiful building on Collingwood Street, built in the early 1900s, and you'll see the emblem of the Sun Life Insurance Company. The Sun Life Insurance Company previously traded from this site, and the logo originates from the fire insurance marks that were plaques on buildings displayed to indicate their insurer. Coopers moved to these premises in 1897, originally mainly specialising in horse and carriage sales. However, as these fell out of use in the early 20th century, it was converted to a car sales room, and the ghost sign built into the building with white brick gives an indication of the business keeping up with the times. This sign probably dates from about the mid-1920s. James Cooper died in 1931, and the family sold the building in the 1970s. It was later converted into a Hertz car rental office. However, it's now used as offices, and there's been a sympathetic restoration of the building, keeping some of the original interior features, which included indoor stabling, tethering rings for horses, a ground floor auction and parading area. Some trenches even revealed remnants of Hadrian's Wall inside the building. If you've ever drove along St James's Boulevard, past Westgate Road, you've likely seen the ghost sign for Robert Sinclair Tobacco Company Limited. In 1856, the Robert Sinclair Tobacco Company was established. By 1930, it had been acquired by Imperial Tobacco, and in 1953 it had ceased trading. The company was a tobacco wholesaler with huge success in distribution across northern England and Scotland. Robert Sinclair from the Orkneys opened a small tobacconist on Dean Street in 1855. The business prospered and they moved to larger premises. In 1913, the company hired an aviator to deliver a new brand of tobacco in souvenir tins from the town moor to outlying areas. This sign for the Grand Hotel on Percy Street near the Haymarket is a former hotel built around 1890. The proprietor was a Mr. James Duker in 1893, whose company was a wine and spirit merchant, but also had many pubs and hotels. However, by 1958, the building was bought by Newcastle University, and it's now shops, cafes and accommodation. We're on the Keyside again for the next one, and near the Tyne Bridge on the Keyside is the sign for the Tyne Tea Shipping Company. Between 1903 and the 1970s, the company ran passenger and cargo routes between Newcastle and London, as well as from Newcastle to continental ports. At one point, the company employed 400 people and operated 10 steamers. Two of the steamers that the Tyne Tea Shipping Company used were called the Hadrian and the Bermuda. Some ships were known as cattle boats, as they brought stock by sea from Scotland to the Tyne and then went on to London. The building is now a restaurant, and the sign has been restored to its former glory as a sign of the move from industry to tourism on the Tyne. We're back on Newgate Street now at the old CoOp Warehouse. This Art Deco building was built in 1932 and closed fully in 2011. It's now used as a hotel and houses bars and restaurants on its ground floor. The building was designed by the company architect L.J. Eakins, and the clock faces still show the cooperative lettering. I'd like to think at least one of these clock faces is original. However, at least one of them is likely a replica of the original, having been stolen by metal thieves. The roof of the building also being stripped by copper thieves when it stood empty for 10 years. We've now travelled to Stow Street in Chinatown, and the Cooperative Fruit Warehouse was built in 1908, again to a design by L.G. Eakins, the architect of the Co-op Wholesale Society. The large original trademark of a wheat sheaf is above the door, the wheat sheaf being the symbol for cooperation, as a single stalk doesn't stand alone, but a sheaf together can. Labour and Weight uses the American spelling to show support and solidarity with the US anti-slavery movement. The building is no longer used as a fruit warehouse and is now used as a restaurant. In the Windows Arcade is this lovely restored ghost sign of a former bootmaker, John Hamilton. John Hamilton was one of the arcade's earliest tenants when it was remodelled as a shopping arcade from its former Victorian use as an art gallery, reading room and hotel. Later, the business moved to Granger Street before closing in the 1970s. They weren't the only bootmaker here in the early days. It was shared with Britton & Son, but their sign, if they had one, doesn't survive. The Baltic Flour Mill. Opened as a flour mill in 1950 by Rank Hovers, the J is for Joseph Rank, it had a silo capacity of 22,000 tonnes and was upriver from Spiller's Mill, which was sited on the opposite bank. It was easily located next to the riverbank for loading and unloading. The mill was designed in the late 30s and was extended in 1957 to add an animal food mill. The company closed the mill in 1981, where it employed 160 people. It was named Baltic as rank hovers named their mills after season auctions. It's now used as an art gallery. We're back on the quayside now, and under the shadow of the Tyne Bridge, it's the Bridge Tavern, known by many previous names, including News, Fever, and the Pump House. As can be seen above this doorway, the sign Newcastle Arms is seen, one of the pub's previous names, but the original Newcastle Arms actually stood further along Keyside Hill, but was demolished in 1925 to make way for the bridge stanchions, and the Newcastle Arms was built between the columns of the Tyne Bridge. It was built in 1926. However, it's doubtful whether this is actually the original Newcastle Arms sign or a modern replica. We're on the quayside again. This building dates from the late 18th century and used to be home to a map seller called Matthew Dodds, who printed charts there for ships and sailors voyaging the world. The original chart sign can be seen painted above the third floor windows, which gives an indication of the former shop's use. Matthew Dodds set up shop here after the fire of Newcastle and Gateshead in 1854. He lived on the top floor with his family and had a printing press on the first floor. The ground floor he had a retail shop where he manufactured and sold maps for seafarers to safely navigate the river and seas. The building is now used as a bar and restaurant. Montague Burton's was founded in 1903 and was a Leeds-based British tailoring company. This sign on Newgate Street is above the old Burton's building before it moved to Northumberland Street. The sign predates 1949. The sign is quite well worn and hard to read at ground level, but one of the slogans of Burton's at the time was "Let Burton dress you, the tailor of taste." On this building in Marlborough Crescent in Newcastle near the Centre for Life, you can only just make out the very faint remnants of a ghost sign, probably at least 100 years old. Just above the first floor windows, you can just about make out the lettering City Implement Works, and above the top floor, Craven Company Limited. Craven Company Limited specialised in farm machinery in the 1880s to the 1920s. Marlborough Crescent is near the former cattle market in Newcastle, which is where the Centre for Life now stands, which makes sense for farmers to be near. In 1927, Craven Company moved towards buildings on Highbridge, so this sign predates that. There's no further reference to this company post-1940, when their senior partner died, Mr. Scott. The building was later used by machinists and possibly Crescent cars, but currently looks to be empty. I hope that you enjoyed learning about these ghost signs of Newcastle as much as I did. Which one was your favourite? Let me know in the comments.